Good morning. I am so grateful to be here with you today, and especially grateful for your wonderful tech team in supporting me to be able to join you virtually. With everything going on in our world and in our country, I find myself reflecting on the dream of Dr. King to build a beloved community and the lengths he went to using nonviolent interfaith approaches for civil disobedience and in protest to build the beloved community he dreamt of, to the point that he was labeled an extremist at one point by the United States government. He was committed to interfaith organizing and movement work. Thinking about this, I want to explore today the interfaith core within Unitarian Universalism, starting with some storytelling. My pluralist journey expanded in 2009 when I was hired as the director of youth programs at the UU Church of Arlington in Virginia, even though I was and still am a Muslim. Except now I'm a Unitarian Universalist Muslim, aka UU Muslim. Surprise! I dove headfirst into work and learning about Unitarian Universalism, mostly from middle and high school teens. At the same time, I remember visiting my Pakistani Muslim parents in that first month I was hired and witnessing a complete parental freakout. Why? Because my younger brother had Googled UUs only to stumble upon websites declaring it was a cult. Unknown to me, he had convinced my parents I had been hired by a cult. But to some degree, I don't even think my brother cared if I joined a cult. He just enjoyed watching my parents freak out. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise because I was finally able to sit with my family and talk to them about why I really liked working in a church community. And many years later, seeing the surprise at the fact I was serious about it at my ordination. For the longest time, I always felt like I was towing the line between completely belonging in a UU community and being okay with wanting to stay Muslim too. You see, I like being Muslim a lot. I love the Pakistani Muslim culture I grew up in, the prayers my grandmothers taught me to recite when I'm scared. I love their traditions, the rituals, and the 10-day long weddings as well. But now I love being a UU too. One of the more powerful experiences I had in my UU journey was around a time of great struggle for my family. My family of 5 migrated to the US in 1998. Then 10 years later of helping out with our family businesses while going to school, we found out only 4 of us were given our citizenship. My middle brother was all of a sudden undocumented and given around 60 days to move out of the country. But he stayed in the US to finish his undergrad degree, where he was holding down a 4.0 GPA. But a few months later, he was pulled over while driving and he was arrested for being undocumented. After being held in a local prison in Virginia, he was transferred to a detention center in Youngstown, Ohio, many, many miles away from us. My family lived in fear for those 2 weeks because we weren't able to communicate with him and we weren't told what happened to him. We began to plan regular road trips to Youngstown, Ohio. Now, I usually disliked family road trips because my family is full of opinionated, strong, stubborn, and politically inclined people, and we sometimes drive each other nuts. But these trips became essential to us. We had intense experiences sharing stories with the other detainees and strangers that came into our lives during this time. He was ultimately deported and now lives in London pursuing a degree in medicine. My brother was detained in the same year when UUs were mobilizing to head to Arizona for the 2012 Justice General Assembly focused on immigration issues and human rights. In that same year, the youth I worked with at the time began taking an interest in immigration issues through meeting with neighboring youth who were dreamers. Dreamers are undocumented students hoping to attain college degrees around the country. That year was a learning year for all of us as we decided to raise $10,000 to take 15 members of our youth group to GA. It's a year that stays in my mind in terms of the energy of the youth who squeezed every drop of learning they could about injustices linked to immigration. In one particular moment at the 2012 GA, the youth and I went to an interfaith witness for human rights, which was a candlelight vigil at the Tent City Jail. Tent City Jail was founded by Sheriff Joe Arpaio and sounds exactly like what it was. Tents set up in the sweltering heat of the desert to detain people in. It was a hot and humid night when the youth and I got off a school bus near a large detention center for the vigil. It was a large, sprawling building where some of the undocumented people were being kept until being moved to the tents. As we joined the other UUs holding vigil, people began singing. One youth whispered she was scared as we were surrounded by police on horseback holding large rifles, and we could see the sheriff amongst them. One of the other youth in our group took a big risk being present in the march with us because he was at that time undocumented as well. Holding hands, we sang so many hymns that night in both English and Spanish. We sang Side of Love now that the title has been changed. This Little Light of Mine, Guide My Feet, There's a River, There's More Love Somewhere, and the list goes on. When we began singing Spirit of Life, first in Spanish and then in English, we saw something incredibly moving happen. A hand popped up and started waving through a narrow window of the detention center. Then another pair of hands popped up in one of the other windows. Yu started whispering, "They can hear us, they can hear us." And the singing got louder and louder. More and more hands started waving through the windows as the singing became thunderous. And all I could think of were my brother's hands waving back at me. It was the night I felt my call to ministry and began my application to Harvard Divinity School. I didn't have the courage to say I'm a UU Muslim openly, not until 2016 at another GA. I find that GAs are where a lot of my powerful spiritual moments have happened. I've been conflicted about my desire to be part of two religions and two communities. It brings up a lot of questions for me, particularly about being in community. What does it mean to be part of a faith community? Can I be both, or do I have to pick one? Well, at the 2016 GA, I realized I could be both. My friend, Reverend Sana Saeed, came up to me and said, "Guess what we've been doing while you've been away?" They proceeded to tell me they've been organizing UU Muslims. And since then, we have a Facebook group. Yay. Thanks in part to their proposal, we had a prayer space at the 2016 GA and the ones following it whenever Ramadan fell during the GA time. It was amazing for me to be going from a really emotionally engaging UU worship service, then 2 hours later praying and breaking a Ramadan fast with a group of devoted UU Muslims. I'm grateful I have a safe space to express myself within a community of multi-faith UU friends. In writing about why he is a UU Hindu minister, Reverend Abhijanamanji shared in an article titled "Faith in the Borderland." As a minister, I share my own religious journey, not because it is more important than anyone else's, but because it is part of building and sustaining relationships. I consider myself a UU Hindu, flavored by the Islamic heritage of my father, Buddhist spiritual practice, and the study and exploration of other world religious traditions. My Unitarian Universalism helps me be a better Hindu, a better human being. It celebrates my identity as a religious hybrid and theological crossbreed. A 2009 Pew Research Center poll titled "Many Americans Mix Multiple Faiths" found that Americans are increasingly blending their religious beliefs with more than one religion, entering interfaith marriages or relationships, and attending worship services of more than one faith community. It also found interfaith marriages and families are on the rise in the US, and that's only gone up during the pandemic. Following in Reverend Janamanji's steps, I share my story today with you because it's part of building and sustaining relationships here today. To give voice to people who identify as multi-faith and those in interfaith families. While UUs are eager to build community outside of their UU congregations with interfaith partners, people holding multi-faith identities within Unitarian Universalism, such as UU Hindus, UU Muslims, UU Jews, UU Buddhists, UU pagans, UU atheists and humanists, UU Christians, can be overlooked. So I ask you, how could engaging people who identify as multi-faith and interfaith in this congregation help you to understand what it means to be a Unitarian Universalism today? Could it help us be more powerful allies for our neighbors? Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, a UU theologian, has traced influences of Islam on Unitarianism in the book and in the Edict of Tortor in her book titled Children of the Same God. Her colleague, Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, another UU minister, reflects on Ritchie's groundbreaking work by stating, especially illuminating is the revelation that Unitarians are children of Islam as well of Christianity and Judaism. Parker goes on to say, I have learned from Ritchie that you can find Muslim prayer rugs in Unitarian churches in Eastern Europe. It is pertinent for us to start thinking of how to create and sustain welcoming spaces for people identifying as multi-faith or those seeking pluralism, because more people will be coming to our communities in the next few years searching for answers or refuge. Could we make space for those amongst us who are UU Christians, and in the same breath hold space for the UU humanists and atheists amongst us as well? Imagine how our spaces and communities could look in the future as we expand to welcome the multi-faith, such as UU Muslims and interfaith families. Some churches could have Muslim prayer rugs, like we do at GA. There are already readings on Islam in our gray hymnal and hymns written by Muslims, some of which we've heard today. There are already UU churches in Massachusetts and elsewhere that have welcomed small Muslim congregations to use their church as a prayer and meeting room. These might seem like small acts of creating welcoming spaces, but to others, they can be large gestures of radical hospitality. Ritchie states in her book, yet what Unitarian Universalism has always understood, even if cultural values have sometimes kept it from acting on that understanding, is that religion is not a container, but a matrix of relationships. Religion is not a single thing, nor is it ever the same. It is not a substance, it is an action. And if religion is relationship, then it is inherently multi-religious. In one of his final books, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. showed that race was part of his broader concern with human relations at large, was one part of his broader concern. He says, quote, "This is the new great problem of mankind. We have inherited a great world house in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, because we can never again live apart. We must learn somehow to live with each other in peace." To build and sustain a beloved community, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dreamt of, means you have to be willing to commit to the dream when things are messy, be a witness, and be in solidarity while being grounded in a theology of love that is vital to Unitarian Universalism. Even if it means you may only see a small, worn hand waving back at you from a window, witnessing and loving you back. This dream, a dream and vision of solidarity and love, gives me hope in our faith. Amen.